Ready? Laura, settle in. Camera's going on, so.
Oh, yes, okay.
Makeup, angles. Yeah, camera. Action. There will be 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Do we have one more member trying to get in? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our annual licensing meeting. Hello, good morning. We've just started. Also, I'd like to take the opportunity today to mention Patrick Crowley, who passed away in 2021, who was chair, senior licensing officer. Can you correct me?
It's the licensing team manager.
Yes, the licensing team manager for many, many years, and really helped to change our policy, and he was excellent. We're very grateful to him, and Fiona Johnson has taken his place. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies today from Councillors David Lindsay and Stuart Graham.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? So we will first go over we'll agree or the minutes of the 7th of March 2023. Does everyone agree to minutes?
Agreed.
Okay, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
And I don't know, could we have them earlier by email? Because I can't remember what happened a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
We can do that, yes. Good point.
The problem with many of these annual meetings, the minutes are presented at the next meeting a year later, which is really difficult.
Okay, I'll sign them all.
Chair, can I just add that I was also present, but I'm not listed.
Oh,
Apart from that.
so Lindsay's not on the list. Will we add that?
Yes.
Thank you. Should I make a note by hand? Would that be more official if I add Lindsay?
No, so if you just sign them as they are, but the minutes of this meeting will say that those were amended to reflect
Okay,
the
excellent.
changes that
Excellent, thank you very much. Now we will get to the permanent pavement licensing provisions. These are for decision. James McCool, will you please make a presentation?
Yeah. So late last year, the government introduced the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023. It had numerous provisions around, planning, but one section relates to payment licensing. And the import of the Act is that payment licensing shall become permanent. And some of the sort of difficulties around the temporary regime, such as the very quick processing timetable and the very low fees, have been addressed. They've extended the processing time from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and they've increased the fees to relate, or the maximum fee, to more closely relate to the costs that are incurred by local authorities. They've introduced powers that would allow enforcement and the removal of, payment furniture, in specified circumstances. There's obviously no process. So the provisions of that Act, though, have not yet been implemented. They require a piece of regulation, secondary legislation, which to set a commencement date. The government have indicated to us that commencement date is likely to be before autumn. What that means, probably sometime during the summer. The current temporary provisions run out on the 30th of September 2024 this year. So we very much expect that these permanent provisions will be implemented perhaps a couple of months before the end date of the temporary provision. And in terms of what we haven't done in this year's fees and charges schedule is set fees for powers that are not yet implemented. So our intention is that once the government sets the commencement date, at that point, we will consider what fee schedule will be most appropriate. So under the permanent provisions, we can issue payment licenses for a period of up to 2 years. So it might be that we decide, well, we have a particular rate for, say, a 1-year license and maybe a different rate for a 2-year license, for example. We would have that discretion subject to due governance. Because the license committee only sits annually, the decision will basically is to grant the director delegated powers to set fees, but they would then be retrospectively approved by the next license.
Are there any questions for James? Greg?
Thanks very much, James. Thanks very much for the paper. Broadly it looks like a good thing because they're efficient. But we've, of course, got quite a lot of legacy tables and chairs arrangements out there, or trade tables and chairs permissions, which Para 1.7 will say become obsolete as a form. So what happens to the legacy ones that have already got permission for tables and chairs?
Well, the licenses will run their course, but we won't be able to issue any fresh licenses or renewals under the Highways Act 1980. So they would have to apply for payment license. They wouldn't have any option to apply under the Highways Act. Now, as far as we're concerned, and I think it's broadly agreed within the sector, there's nothing really under the Highways Act license that you can't really get under a payment license. I mean, payment licenses actually have a lot more benefits to them in terms of the deemed planning permission, and we have greater discretion to set conditions than we did under the Highways Act, which is very purely about obstruction.
Could we have Highways Act permissions extant for several years to come, or are they? Or do they have I can't remember if they. It's a while since I've done one.
They're all more or less 12 months.
Okay.
Harrods do have one, but of longer duration, I believe, but nearly every other one is 12 months.
So the replacement will be pretty quick.
Yeah, very quick.
Process then when so in 2 years' time we probably won't have any. Maybe the Harrods one you referred to, but probably not many left. Tables and chairs.
Yeah, perhaps none. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, James.
Dory?
Thanks. The thing about fees is a question. If the legislation sets the maximum How do we handle the need to increase them after, say, a couple of years in inflation and staff get paid more? You know, how do we deal with that then?
I expect, this is my expectation, I expect that will stay at that level for many years. Because we've got things under the Highways Act like the £100 fee for big penalty notice, these things endure. We've had the £100 fee since 2020. I expect once these maximum levels come in, they will probably endure for who knows. Until such time as people feel they're no longer appropriate, and then they'll probably ratchet up in a significant way.
What interests me is that there is no provision like inflation adjustment. This is the surprising thing.
Well, I suppose we have the discretion to set them below the maximum level, and then we could deal with inflation in that way.
And I agree, but it's just that should we get to the level, because I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, the government didn't do it, so that's.
I think the other thing is that if you only grant a 1 year licence, they have to renew, so they'd have to pay another fee. So if you grant a 2 year licence, then they'll get 2 years for, say, maximum of £500. Whereas if you grant, if you say that you're only going to grant a licence for 12 months, then they have to pay their renewal fee, don't they?
Right, so we could actually say, should we choose to do so, I don't know, let's say in a couple of years or 3 years, it's a bit, whatever fee is, we've reached the maximum stated, only way to increase the fees is to not give out any 2 year licences.
Yeah.
You can do that,
Yeah.
okay. Fair
You couldn't grant a licence up any time up to 2 years. But the council can decide, well, look, we're only going to give 1 year
So will our
or
internal,
less.
right, fair enough. Is our internal process going to be the same as it is now, just with more time?
Yes.
to do the same?
Yes,
So
the
you could be
internal process.
a licensing panel member and you.
That's correct, yes, it's a lot less, so there's a 2 week consultation period, which means there's probably less of a chance for, people out in the community to miss the consultation altogether. And then a 2 week determination period, which just gives a little bit more breathing time to go to the chair.
Sure, because I had complaints, we all didn't know about it. In part,
Well,
yeah, which is fair.
No, well, there was one situation, if you signed up for weekly alerts on my RBKC, depending on, the day which the application came in, it was possible to actually miss it. Just,
I did tell
more
people,
practical.
I did advise people to sign up for these newsletters.
But that's now impossible, now that it's a 2 week consultation.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thanks, James. In terms, so you said permanent, what does that define? I mean, is it like, I don't know, 100 years?
No, permanent is
5 years?
actually maybe the wrong, maybe that was a bad choice of words. So it's permanent until new legislation comes in to replace it and such. So the Business and Planning Act that came in 2020 was very much a response to the pandemic, whereas this section under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act is what the government sees as going forward. So it's permanent until such time as future legislation comes in. The permanent provisions allow us to issue licenses of up to 2 years duration. So they're not permanent licenses; they're permanent provisions, if you know what I mean. The provisions going forward.
And this applies to al fresco, or that's a separate thing?
No, we obviously have our British summertime licensing policy where we license summertime terraces during daylight saving time. And what we do there is we've got a 2-stage process. First, we create temporary footway extensions by suspending parking bays, and then we issue pavement licenses for the pavement furniture. So we're going to use we use pavement licenses. So we'd issue a 6-month license, bringing them up to the end of daylight savings time. So although we could, in theory, issue a 2-year license, that's not what we're doing under our guidance or under our approach. Our approach is each year you have to apply for a fresh license because they may wish to change their setup, or they may wish not to put it out this year at all. So yeah, for the summertime terraces, that's just, we do use the same powers, but we only issue licenses until the end of the summertime period.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions? Yes, Linda?
I have two. One is the cost actually going to cover the additional time spent by licensing officers in preparing the case? Because it's far more like a planning application. It's got probably more detail. And also, I would query that they shouldn't actually provide a drawing along with their application, because that might be one of the reasons why residents might want to complain.
Well, the council can set the parameters of the application form, and I think we do say that we need a plan, don't we?
We do need a plan. I think obviously the government is very keen to make life easier for businesses and make it easier to do business. So, I understand that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, they're saying that if a business has previously had a pavement license, they don't need to draft up, a fresh plan. They can rely on the fact that they had one previously. But what we could do in our processes is just, in terms of what we put on the website, we could put on the previous plan. But they don't, it's not, under the law, they're not required by statute to submit a fresh plan if they previously had a pavement license.
Yes, but as you're going to a new regime and tightening things up, you're changing it. Actually, this is an opportunity for some of the previous placements of tables and chairs to be reviewed if they have caused a problem for residents, especially on very narrow pavements, whereas people have either they're not being maintained, or they're not being cleaned, or they're not being taken in, or you know what I mean? There's got to be some mechanism which is really transparent, in order that when people do make objection, they know on what grounds they're objecting.
Well, I mean, if there's been problems, then the Highway Authority should reject the application and make them put in a fresh application with an appropriate plan.
Which comes to my point.
Yeah.
How much additional time is it going to take the licensing officers to be able to process the case?
Unfortunately, we had discussions with the government. The government didn't want to increase the costs. All authorities wanted more money because at the moment it's £100. But the government introduced this system, so it's a faster, more streamlined and cheaper process for businesses. And that's the whole basis of the Act. So unfortunately, the fixed fees are not something that we can change.
The whole point is that it's to help business.
No, I completely understand. But there's the other side of the coin is actually the people who are actually having to do the work, processing the paperwork. And actually that is a direct cost to the council.
It is. But it's the same as the Licensing Act. The Licensing Act is also fixed fees, and the licensing department spend an enormous amount of time dealing with applications, but they are fixed fees. We've got no discretion to increase those.
So when we come to the seasonal licence, the summertime, is there any way that one could increase the costs on that?
So
just be clear, it's no different if it's done under the pavement licence. So if they make an application under this Act, then the fee is set.
All right, thank you.
So last year we talked about summertime terraces and how we authorise them, and there's a two-stage process. So the first stage, the council provides a service where we arrange temporary footway extensions, and we do levy fees for that. So we do get additional monies for the temporary footway extent for the summertime terraces.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That's a good thing. What is it? I guess it depends on the size, but can you-
Depends on the size, yeah. It's actually in the next paper, the fees and charges, but if somebody has a single parking bay, I think it works out about £1,100 roughly between the implementation fee and the monitoring fee.
Okay, well, that was, yeah, compensates you for loss of income.
James, lots of the applications we got is with table and chairs design. Remember when we have on the payment licenses, we have had applications that had tables and showed how they wanted to arrange them.
Oh, yeah.
And then you made recommendations, we made recommendations.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Okay, can we agree?
Agreed.
Agree? Anyone not agree? Next. Sharon, you will be reviewing the licensing fees for decision. Thank you.
Good morning. So section 1 of the report sets out the background to our licensing fees and how they are distributed. They're split into two parts. Part A is to cover the direct processing costs that are incurred when we receive an application. And part B is to cover the ongoing costs. So that would be things like dealing with complaints, doing research, monitoring premises, reviewing our forms, anything really that doesn't form part of the initial application cost. Where a premises is an ongoing licence like the Gambling Act, the Part B fee is actually the annual fee, and it's based again on direct costs. So if I just take you through the tables, so table 1.
So on page 17, everyone.
So gambling fees, the increases for applications are fairly modest. Some are sort of just below the 4%, which is recommended by finance, some slightly above. Because these fees are based on cost recovery, we are not subject to the 4% recommended increase, so some of that increase will be less or more, depending on the costs. We get very few gambling applications, and this is really largely a paper exercise. We might get one application every 2 or 3 years. We haven't seen an increase in gambling premises within the borough. We get very few. So most of our revenue on gambling fees comes from the annual fees. And the increases here are more modest, and they are based on cost recovery. Every year we get a figure from finance, an average hourly rate for each of the officers that are working within the team. And the increases for this year are more modest than the previous years. But again, these are the figures that we have, and these are the figures that we feel we can justify if we are challenged. Moving on to table 2. Our special treatment fees, again, the increases here are very modest. Again, this is due to the hourly rates that we receive from finance. There's only been a very small increase in the hourly rates for officers. The Part B fee in particular, for special treatments, has increased very, very low. And that's basically due to the fact that we have more licensed premises, so the actual cost for running the regime is spread across more premises, so it's less of an increase than we would normally see. The one sort of exception there is where we have 1 or 2 premises that only provide ear piercing, things like Claire's accessories, and the increase there is slightly higher. I think the biggest increase that we've seen is obviously in the next, going down the table, is in animal licensing. And the reason for this is there has been an uplift in fees from the Corporation of London, who do all of the inspections. It is a requirement under the Act that when you make an application for a business involving animals, that you have to have an initial inspection, and that person has to be qualified under the Act. We don't have anybody in-house who has that qualification. We don't have enough premises to basically justify employing somebody with that qualification or getting one of our officers qualified. It's quite difficult to qualify because you have to visit every single type of licensed premises that you might come across, and we just don't have that spread of businesses within the borough. So that is brought in from Corporation of London, who tend to do visits for most of London, and their fees have increased quite substantially in some cases. And part of that, I think, is this is relatively new, probably 4 or 5 years, something like that, about 5 years. And so as they get more experience dealing with these types of premises, they're better able to judge just what's involved in doing an inspection, just about the amount of work. So the fees here have increased in some cases quite substantially. I have to say again, it's largely a paper exercise for some of these. We don't have any pet shops or businesses that are involved in selling animals. When it comes to boarding, most of our premises that we have are doggy daycare centres. We have, I think, 1 home boarder. Again, we've got no dog breeders, no stables. So again, these are largely paper exercises, and it's based on our knowledge of dealing with other types of premises and what we think will happen if we get one of these applications in. Moving on to other licences, scrap metal, occasional sale.
Before you leave
Sure.
that area, you mentioned the minutes of the last meeting, sorry, Chair, the minutes of the meeting, you mentioned there was one wild animal that's been around for 4 years.
Yes,
Presumably that's the one that's been licensed here.
yes.
Where is it and what is it, do you know?
It's a serval cat.
You might have mentioned it last year, but I
Yeah.
can't remember.
Yes, and I think it's just around the back of Kensington High Street.
Yeah.
It's in a house. It's in a house. It's in a secure.
Someone's got to check this, say once a year, the thing's still.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to, yeah.
It has to be inspected. And normally there's sort of the hands go up. Can I go and go on the visit with the inspector?
Yeah.
Maybe you could go, Doria.
Why not? I'll come with you. You can go first.
You just look out the window, Doric's climbing up the wall there. While the other big man's carry on with it.
Yeah. So that's the one dangerous. We have had in the past we have had inquiries. I think somebody had some sort of very large snake, but that.
Name.
Yeah, they were looking to move into the borough and they had some sort of back restriction or something like that. But
Isn't that a wild animal? Like, yeah.
well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. You do need a licence to have these animals. It's under the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. But moving on to the other licences. Scrap metal dealers, Sunday loading, again, largely these are paper exercises. We have a couple of scrap metal collectors who collect in the borough, but we may get one application every couple of years. Sunday loading, we've only got 3, we've got 2 Sainsbury's and Harrods who load and unload before 9 AM on Sundays, so they renew that every year, but other than that, we don't have any of the other licences. So again, it was a paper exercise based on what we think would happen with an application came in.
Do you include cats? It says dogs, but I've seen some of the salons for animals have cat and dog salons. It's a new one.
Yeah, it's not the salons that need license, so if you take your dog to the dog park, train, we don't license those, it's only actually if you're boarding animals.
I see, so it's not considered a special treatment?
No,
Okay.
no.
What is near Beer?
Near Beer is it's a license essentially for I'm trying to think of the word.
It's hard to explain that
Is
one.
that the one?
It's a companion, so it's a companion, yeah. It's a companion
Hostess
bar.
bar.
Thank you.
Hostess
What? It is a sex shop in one of these. It could be a sex shop.
It's not a second.
It's not a sex shop.
No, it says some. I thought.
No, it's different.
So this legislation was brought in, it was actually an adoptive act which we adopted many years ago. At the time, we've not had a problem in this firm, we've never issued any licences. But in Westminster, there was a lot of people getting scammed out of a lot of money. They would go into these bars, they would buy something that was called champagne, but it was at such a low level of alcohol that it didn't actually meet the criteria for being determined alcohol. They would buy it and then they would pay sort of £300.
500.
500. And it was basically because there was a hostess who was sitting with them. So you know, it was an act that we adopted.
So why do you call it beer? Because it's lower alcohol than beer.
Yeah, but well, basically yes, it's non-alcoholic, but it's being described as being alcoholic.
Okay.
But again, it's, you know, we've never had an application, but this is based on if we were to get one. So we set the fee just in case somebody decides to apply. So moving on to table 3, sex establishment licences. The increases in here are more substantial. Again, it is a paper exercise. We've had inquiries now and again, but we've never actually issued any licences for sex entertainment in years. But if we,
Sorry, Sharon.
yeah.
Under sex shop and sex cinema, it got 2 plus points, which would indicate no licences currently, but you do have a sex shop called Closing.
I can talk about that one. So Councillor Wade is indeed correct. We had the premises known as Clone Zone on Old Brompton Road. Over the last 4 years, they've routinely written to the council saying that they're no longer a sex shop and they're just like Anne Summers. Now, when we first started to license them, they did do quite a lot of R18 videos and magazines and so on. And I've been twice a year for the last 4 years, and they don't do that anymore now. Most people routinely go online to watch videos or get their magazines online, and when you go into the shop, there is quite a lot of clothes on sale. They also do have sex toys on sale, which I said to them, the amount they have on sale is not comparable to Anne Summers, because with Anne Summers they have just a little corner. With Clone Zone, you walk in and there's a huge amount on display, a huge amount. So they have now reduced the amount of sex toys they've had on display. I've consulted with Westminster, because they have a Clone Zone in Westminster, also colleagues in Lambeth and Wandsworth on their sex shops, and yeah, we've all come to the same decision that they no longer need a licence as it stands at the moment. However, we will be routinely monitoring. It's okay for them to take it away, first of all, but who knows, once I walk through the door, they could put the sex toys back on display in a huge amount again. So I will be monitoring it from now on. But as I said, yeah, they don't need a licence at the moment, but we will be checking.
When you talk about that, it's also about the presentation of the window display, which some of them are more acceptable than others.
Yeah.
What control and is there control within this?
It's still control because if they are putting something that I can't remember the name of the act. You've seen.
There is
Yeah.
there is a piece of legislation if there is explicit material on display. The thing with sex shop licensing is that the premises has to be used to a significant degree for
Yeah, it was
what's
just
termed
an inquiry really about procedure, because they might not have the objects on display, but they are being sold. And also that that's sometimes reflected in the window display.
I think the thing is, obviously, certainly the last few years, more and more people are now shopping online. And so, whereas previously they would have relied on people walking through the door to purchase, now more and more people just buy what they want online.
And also they have things in boots now, sex
Yeah.
toys. It's much more widespread than it used to be.
It is. So we have to take that into consideration, and bearing in mind that we've visited, the amount of sex toys on display wasn't as to a significant degree compared to the other stuff they had on sale. So they do a lot of clothes and undergarments and so on. So that's why we resolved that they wouldn't need a license, but we will be checking and continuing monitoring.
And if there's anything offensive or people don't want children to see,
Then there is
Monitor
power,
in
we
the
do have
windows.
powers.
That's
to
the
do
window
that.
display.
Yeah.
that's the window display, exactly.
The only other, well, the next table, table 4, is our pre-application advice fees. We increased these more substantially last year. We did a costing exercise to work out what it actually costs us, and our fees did increase quite substantially last year in some cases. This year, they've just been uplifted by the hourly officer rate that we've been getting from finance. So again, the increases here are quite modest. Table 5, the tables and chairs. Having spoken to James, these were just increased by the recommended 4%, although I don't think we get a lot of income from the tables and chairs applications now. I think people tend to opt for the pavement licence, and it's a cheaper option for them. So, in terms of revenue, I don't think there's going to be a substantial.
The revenue is expected to fall as payment licenses become more widespread and indeed omnipresent once the act is implemented.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Did I understand on the previous paper that with the new legislation we will no longer be issuing payment licences under Highways Act, it will be under the Levelling Up Regeneration?
Yeah, so under the Highways Act, we call them in this authority tables and chairs licenses. But they're really section 115E licenses under the Highway Act, so they're a license to put an amenity on the highway. So the term pavement license only was introduced in 2020 by the Business and Planning. Previously that term was not in
Yeah,
use.
tables and chairs.
Yeah.
I suppose the question I'm asking is, I'm a little bit confused if whether we call it tables and chairs under Highways Act. I understood from the previous paper that's not going to be, the existing licenses will run to the end and then it has to be Business and Planning Act. Is that not right?
That's when the Business and Planning Act comes into effect, and it's not in effect
Okay.
yet. So somebody applying in April,
Yeah,
these
would still have.
could still apply.
Thank you.
It's confusing, but it makes sense.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Can I make a general comment? Jim, I think I made the same last year, and I think this meeting, we should be looking at these fees, etc., before the budget is set. We did the same last year, we just had the meeting after the budget. But if we are able to put in any, query any of them, blah, 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 I mean, it's a fait accompli now, that we're looking at, which is being explained to us. But I think, the annual meeting of the licensing should be before the budget is set, the council budget meeting.
Would you like to comment on that?
I mean,
In practical terms,
we
please.
used to have 6 monthly meetings.
Yes.
So we used to run on the financial year.
Yes,
So April to
yes,
March. And we always had one in the autumn. That changed some years ago to an annual meeting.
yes,
One thing that we did do some years ago, particularly for fees, was we did have a meeting in the autumn specifically to look at fees. It was, I think we called it a fee scrutiny committee.
Yeah, it was like a working
yeah.
party, so it wasn't a committee,
No.
just to analyse all the figures.
Yes. So, I mean, there's no reason why that couldn't be, we couldn't do that again. That would need to be, I mean, I don't know when the budget is set, so what month would that be in?
I mean, it just seems the same, I made the same comment last year, that, you know, that we're shutting the stable door after the horses bolted kind of thing. I mean, you can look at them and say, oh, well, I think the ones on animals are a bit high, but it's a moot point because it's been decided.
In the minutes last year, I think when you did raise this point, it was agreed that this would be different this year.
Yes, I think so.
I'm just trying to find it. It is in the minutes.
Yes, I mean, the figures can, I mean, you can change the figures. The difficulty is, I suppose, is that these have been costed out based on our knowledge of dealing with an application and the different elements involved and who's involved in who does inspection. These are the things that we feel we can justify. Now, if you feel that you want to increase that fee, then that's within this committee's power. But if we are challenged on those fees, we have to be able to justify what we're charging.
With all respect, the point of having a licensing committee is to look at these things.
Yeah.
And of course you do your best in presenting figures as you want, I'm sure you try to get the right figures, but I think, for the licensing committee to make any sense, we should look at them before it's set. That's all I'm saying.
I agree, I mean,
Otherwise we're rubber stamping something.
yeah, I mean,
Page 5, it was agreed, this is last year, point 6 on page 5, it was agreed that the report would be brought to the committee earlier in the process in following years. And comparative fees would also be provided.
Great.
Yeah, worth pointing out that we were scheduled to meet about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and then the committee dates changed to today. 4 or 5 weeks ago would have been before the budget, but I don't know why it was changed, it just happened, so.
Only just before the budget, don't they?
Well, it was a couple of 3 weeks before, wasn't it? I don't, depends how far in advance you would want to meet. If you have a decision making or sort of an exploratory meeting, it would have to be much earlier. If you want a decision making meeting, it would be shortly.
I mean, I'm happy for a working party, the chairman and the committee members are happy for that. I will put my hands up and apologise to say that we had to reschedule the meeting due to staff resources. We have got a number of staff on long-term sick, with annual leave and everything. And there's still not a replacement for me, so I've moved up, but there's still not a replacement for me. So, yeah, we have been struggling the last year or so. So apologies for missing that on the minutes, and we can make sure that's in place for next year.
I think we'll take this on board and perhaps have a meeting in November. Does that work for all of you? James, does that work with you?
well, I might be involved, but yeah, November seems good time.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, November.
Yeah.
Have a chat about it and see where we go with that. I personally do not have a problem with the fee adjustment. Do you have any specific one?
The one that strikes me as being, where you've given a reason for it as being high is the kind of doggy daycare thing. Because things like sex shops and gambling, that's one thing. But doggy daycare enables people to go to work. And it seems like they're getting the highest uplift, almost double a sex shop kind of thing, which doesn't seem right to me.
I mean, what I would say about the animal licensing is the licenses can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So most of our licenses are 2 years, and they're given a star rating when they're visited by the animal inspector. And depending on her findings or his findings, they will then be given star rating, and most of our licences are 2-year licences. So although the fees seem quite high, it is for a 2-year licence, and it does include 2 visits by the animal inspector, one at the point of making the application, one mid-term. If the fees were lowered, then it's likely we would not recoup the costs that it actually costs us to bring in that specialism.
And also, I guess that the dogs are going to be looked after properly, don't they?
Yeah, the inspections take several hours. I mean, there is a whole checklist that has to be gone through. It's a very detailed inspection. Our direct costs are probably less than half of what the actual fee is that's being set. Most of it is the inspection costs.
I'm just wondering if we do move this to November, can we agree at that point? Or do we still have to bring it up again at our annual meeting?
We would probably still have to bring it to the annual meeting because we don't get the schedule of fees from the Corporation of London normally until around December, January.
Oh, I see.
So whilst we can tell
Especially we have the meeting in January, well, makes sense.
whilst we can tell you what our costs will be, our processing costs, for the animal licences in particular, the end product will be slightly different because we will have to take into account what they're actually billing us for these inspections.
Just my feeling of that is even just from the point of view of an earlier briefing, because especially from a bunch of committees, and then you're looking at this table kind of quite short notice.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to absorb a lot of the time actually. So from me personally, the earlier the better. It just gives me time to absorb what's happening, even if it's not settled yet. Then by the time we get to a decision making process, and be sort of baked in and absorbed a little bit. But even just from the point of view of being briefed on what's the likelihood of increases and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the way that we calculate the fees is we've got some very detailed spreadsheets, which we can put up on a screen and we can talk through them so that you can see how the fee is being calculated and broken down into the different elements.
So what would be more helpful, to have the meeting in January then?
I would think probably November because
Still November, okay, good.
I would say that's probably quite a good time because then if there are changes, it gives us ample time to make those changes.
Okay, excellent. Does everyone agree on that?
Yeah?
Yes, did you want to ask a question, Claire?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, we actually are being asked to approve these.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with any of them. I understand what they're based on. But it does seem a little bit sort of academic if we're being asked to approve something that's already been approved at full council. So it makes me wonder what would happen if we didn't approve them, given that full council's already approved.
These haven't been approved.
No.
These haven't.
These haven't been approved.
They haven't?
No,
Oh,
so this
that's
is
right
done
then.
internally by licenses,
Oh,
so
then I
these
can
haven't
go
been
back.
approved.
It's all good.
They have been changed at licensing committee before, so they're just asking for your approval now, but they haven't been approved at all yet.
No.
Okay,
Thank
one
you for
last
that.
question. Dory, a quick one, please.
Thanks. Whilst it obviously seems sensible to have it before the budget meeting, my question really is, what impact does it have on the budget? I mean, these are cost recovery fees. So therefore, it almost doesn't matter, does it, in terms of the budget? What is the total revenue from these? Therefore, does it really matter whether we have it before or after the budget? That's really my question.
Okay, so these fees only represent the fees that we, council, are responsible for setting.
Indeed. What's
So-
the total revenue?
The total revenue, I think, probably is just under 300k for these. But the
Costs 300.
the bulk of our revenue comes from licensing act fees because we've got over 1,000 premises. But those fees are set by government and they have not increased since 2005. So we don't recover our costs on the Licensing Act.
But
So in
what we
that sense,
can't do is try and then recover the costs from other licences. So each of these is done individually, basically. Every fee is set individually.
does it matter that we have a different part of the budget? That's really what
I think if you want to scrutinise the fees, and I think it's quite right that the committee does, then a separate meeting just to look at how the fees are calculated.
that's what this is.
Now, we've agreed now to do it next autumn.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's not
Separate
actually, practically speaking, that significant, is it?
Well, it depends on whether you want the committee to have a reason for existing or not, Story.
No,
Or we
relative-
just sit
relative to
here
budget.
and go yes, yes, yes.
Relative to
Or is
budget.
there a point of having a licensing committee?
No, I agree.
That is the issue.
The question is not whether we should look at the fees, the question is whether it matters whether we have them before or after the budget.
Okay, let's move on,
That's
please,
all.
unless you have something to add to this.
There's a big
The only other thing is the fee for summertime terraces, because that fee, we needed the fee set for the 1st of March. That was set by the director in consultation with myself as chair.
Right.
So,
Yes,
Just for completeness, the committee have to vote on this one.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
We just, okay, can we accept the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Three.
Agreed, thank you very much, Sharon, very helpful, and Fiona. Now, the performance monitoring report, Fiona,
I'll start on this.
you'll start. So this is a duo act.
Yeah, I will hand over to Fiona. So this just basically gives the committee some facts and figures about what the licensing team have been doing as far as applications in the past 12 months. Section 2 basically gives a highlight of what we've been doing. I'll just go through some of the tables and then hand over to Fiona. So table 1, which is the number of licensed premises that we have in the borough and the number of personal licences that we got over time. The number of licences, premises licences, 1,164, which is an increase, I suppose, from when we started in 2005. It's an increase of about 150. But 40 to 50 of those are in fact shadow licences. We did see quite a big increase in the number of shadow applications, and that was a direct result of COVID businesses going under and landlords wanting to protect their interests.
Absolutely.
There are about 40 to 50 shadow licences, so there's around 1,100, just over the 1,100 actual premises. Although there's 1164 licences, that's about 1,100 plus premises. Table 2, number of applications. If you sort of compare new grants, for example, 2021, you can see 109 new grant applications. Again, a lot of those would have been shadow licence applications. We're still getting from time to time, but they're becoming less prevalent. Obviously, once the licence is granted, it's granted in perpetuity, so they're already there. Our biggest increase in the past year has been temporary event notices. We've seen nearly 100 more than last year. And we've not seen that number of temporary event notices since 2012, the Olympics. That was our highest year. But I think this past year has surpassed that. We tend to get anywhere between 800 and 900 a year. So we've seen quite an increase there.
And the majority of them are for the carnival.
We get about 100 carnival, not all of them related specifically to the carnival area, but some other businesses south of the borough will do carnival type events that weekend. But yeah, the rest of them are businesses that want to, a lot of them are businesses that want to extend hours. So you can see 49% of that number was actually from licensed premises.
Special treatments, we've continued to see an increase in new grant applications for special treatments. And we're currently, we have the highest number of licensed premises that we've had for many years. So we've seen an increase there. In terms of table streams.
Can I just return the cable over here?
Thank you.
Table tree applications considered by committee. We've seen almost a 50% increase on last year, since 2023. Not quite at pre-COVID level, but getting near there. I think this year again, from what we've seen so far, I think it promises to sort of be around the same mark, maybe higher. You'll know that obviously though we you know, 30 is the number that you've actually heard, but there were more cases that we've referred to committee but subsequently withdrawn or resolved before the meeting itself. Table 4 is the number of licences that we've granted as delegated powers. These ones that didn't attract any objections. And we do aim to grant and issue these licences. We do aim for 90% within 2 weeks at the end of the consultation period. We didn't quite meet our target, and we've had problems, several staffing issues over the last few years for one reason or another. And it was only last 2022 that we actually met the target. Over the past 5 years. Realistically, I'm not sure whether or not 90% is now a realistic target, given the challenges that we've had with staffing, the fact that we've had posts deleted. It's becoming more and more difficult for us to meet that target, and perhaps the more realistic target might be 85% to be dealt with within the 2 weeks. What I would say is that we always prioritise those applications where an applicant would be disadvantaged if we delayed issuing the licence. So that would be new grants and variations. But for things like transfers and varied DPSs, they're not disadvantaged if we take an extra week to issue the licence, because the application actually takes effect from the moment they submit the application. So although they don't have the physical licence, they are permitted to operate as a de facto licensee while their application is being considered. So obviously it's a matter for committee, but I mean, based on what we've done so far this year, I think we are going to struggle to hit 90%.
Can I ask just one question on that?
Yeah.
You say the de facto licence. What if you don't grant it?
So for something like a transfer or varied DPS, the only parties who can object are the police, or the Home Office can object if it's an individual who's making an application for transfer of a licence, but they can only object if that person doesn't have the right to work in the UK. So, and it's very rare that we get objections from either of those parties to transfer of varied DPSs.
What happens if you do and it hasn't been granted, that they're technically in breach or whatever? Then what happens?
Well, I mean, basically, they are the de facto licensee until their application is either withdrawn or it comes before committee and the committee decides that it will be reviewed.
So nothing happens.
Henry?
Yes, I do. I just want to wonder, to the chair, whether this should be mentioned to the member for finance as a piece of learning, or the director of finance, to understand the impact of, let's say, deleting posts. That it's not neutral in terms of service delivery. It seems reasonable to change the target, and actually I think it's 89%, isn't it, which is pretty close.
It is.
So well done. But I think if this is having an impact on the service, then perhaps this should be fed back to the relevant channel.
We
Would that
can
make
do that.
sense?
How would you suggest doing that, Heidi?
How would you suggest
Yes,
doing it?
okay.
I mean, is it, do you think the director or you should
So
feed
Heidi,
it back?
may I raise a point for that one?
Yes.
I understand, so once we finish your licensing, then you have a drafting session that goes on between back and forward. Sometimes the council's delay as well. For example, I couldn't do a week, so it was delayed by a week. So that percentage delay, 89%, should have been, I don't know, maybe the best figure would be 98%. This delay is based on what?
So these are applications which don't actually make it to committee, so these are ones which we deal with under delegated authority. So it doesn't factor in ones that have gone before committee if there's a delay in getting that decision out. Because once the summary decision comes out, we issue the licence based on the summary decision, assuming of course that the licence has been granted.
Greg?
Yes, I'd take the point about deleting posts, but staff sickness is something you've also experienced. Is that having a significant effect as well?
It
Because
is.
it's only one person down at the moment.
The issue is that by deleting that post, it means that we don't have the resilience to cover. As Fiona said, we've had one person on long-term sick since November. We've also had other sickness within the team. And we went two weeks in March February, where out of 6 that should have been in, we had 2.
That was due to illness.
It was due to illness, it was due to leave,
And the problem is licensing is really like a treadmill. I mean, it is constant and you have to deal with the applications within a particular time frame. So it is important to build resilience in because otherwise you're really just chasing the tail.
And you're always going to get illness, aren't you?
Absolutely.
So even if they get long term, you're still going to have sickness.
There was another thing as well. So in May last year, we actually acquired the licensing of tables and chairs. Before that, it was actually dealt with by Mr McCall's team. So we acquired that, and it was to help Karen, who everyone knows Karen Brody, with the licensing. So we're trying to help them do that as well. So it has been a difficult period for us the last 12 months.
Yes,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
What would you like to see if we could help?
to get that post back, because
Okay.
the way that it currently works is we essentially, we had 2 people who were directly responsible for managing the inbox, dealing with the objections, dealing with the committee reports, dealing with finance, the debt recovery. That's now down to 1. And to do a committee report takes on average a day plus. You know, something like the roof garden, that was a 2-day job. Because you've obviously got to pull everything together. Just checking the report took me several hours because obviously you want to make sure that everything is correct that's in there with redacting stuff. And also,
It's a high volume premises as well, it gets a high volume of complaints. It does take us a while to go through those complaints. The last thing we want to do is put a resident's name and details out there in the public eye. So that itself could take up to 5 days sometimes just to make sure.
The other thing is that, as you said, your increase in temporary event notices is really substantial, and I've noticed that is a very short window, so they have to draft the report, very, very quickly, and often they are settled. But the amount of time it takes officers to actually prepare the report, send them over to governance, and it's redundant work, but they've obviously had to spend that time in order to comply with the deadlines.
I think also what I've found is that because now we try to be a paperless office, and it takes longer to do things electronically. When you're trying to draft a report and you're looking at things on one screen and trying to then copy that or summarise it on another screen. Whereas before, we would literally print off everything, shuffle it all about and read through it and type. Now we tend to work off 2 screens because everything is electronic.
So would we, as a committee, like, that we can recommend that we look at this? I mean, what is practical?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult, it's not really a legal question.
No, it's not. It's not a legal question. We could advise, we could recommend, but it's not legal.
But I mean, if it's impacting on service, which clearly it is, I mean, if you've got a team of 6 and it goes down to 2, and you've always got to have a bit of resilience, because anyone can be off with the flu or whatever.
And you don't want everyone, I mean, if there are people who are overworked, they're going to get sick as well.
Yes.
So that's going to happen.
And we want to retain staff.
I mean, it's probably a matter for the executive director
Yes.
and the lead member to look at, rather than
So can we put that in the meeting?
I think it's probably perhaps you as a committee, I don't know whether you and the chairs want to have a discussion with them.
well, that's a recommendation
Yes.
to the lead member
I can't have
or
Yeah,
you can't have it.
Sorry, that was part of it.
Well, it's not the lead
Sorry.
member for licensing,
No,
it's
no, it's
probably
the-
to the chief exec, probably.
Well, I don't think it'd be the executive director is, but I don't know if it's the lead member of planning or the executive director, so Bo, on to look at resilience in the licensing department.
Suggest I think it's both, not me.
Yeah,
I think it's both.
who's the executive director
Oh.
to start with?
No, it's not. Bo is the executive director for your service area.
Yeah.
It's not an HR thing, it's government management.
I would also suggest that the lead member and director of finance, who are responsible for setting the budget, receive feedback, not necessarily a recommendation, but they could at least be informed that this is having an impact. So perhaps that can be taken into account going forward.
How does everyone feel?
Well, perhaps they can take.
It's not the first time it's been mentioned by some scrutiny that deleting posts and keeping staff vacancies will, guess what, affect services. So I'd love to amplify that.
Linda, then we'll.
I think we've passed the point that I could ask the question.
Why?
No, because I put my hand up some time ago and we've discussed it, that's okay.
Oh, okay. I'm glad that we were able to discuss it.
I mean, you need to raise it at a higher level in order to get it addressed, because obviously it is affecting the service and you don't want the team to be affected. I mean, well-being is an issue anyway of the council they've promoted.
So the question is,
How best to do it, that's
what
that's what I'm not entirely sure.
Yes, Holly?
Through you, Chair, whilst the committee doesn't have the decision-making powers to be able to say we'll put in a new post, we could put it as an action potentially. Whether that's for you, Chair, to take this forward, obviously it'll be minuted, obviously the strong feeling of the committee about this issue, once those minutes are done, maybe if that would help, for you to then take to the lead member, exec directors, the relevant bodies, and then that kind of boost your position on this, just because you can't do too much actually in the committee meeting right now, but
Exactly.
if you'd like it as an action to be taken forward, we can liaise on that after.
Yes, I mean, if the committee are deciding as a group, you can certainly put forward a recommendation that, that this needs to be looked at because it's affecting performance and other factors.
Delivery.
Agreed.
So that could be a recommendation and then an action on the chair to raise it with the lead member and executive.
Good idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Could I ask a question briefly on this two, these interesting overall activity figures for the year, how many of this level? Is it possible next year, maybe, not this year, to do a table for the last 3 years, so we see the overall activity? Paragraph 2,
Page number.
page 27. In summary, licensing dealt with 948 cases.
That's on the next.
The sort of highlights.
Yes.
So yes, I mean the numbers are broken down with the preceding 3 years in each of the.
Yeah, no, I realise that, but the overall might be just nice if you've got them. So next time, not so last 3, whatever it's called, it's just interesting to get the
Thank you,
overall.
Dory. Can we agree? Agree. Thank you. now an update on appeals by Heidi. Okay,
You sold the chair.
So, I
there's
missed
another
you.
section to
I
that.
missed
before.
you, so sorry, I thought. So sorry, this
Yeah.
is performance monitoring, so sorry.
Yeah, so if we turn to page 30, there's a section 3031, it talks about the amount of suspensions, lapsed and surrendered licences. You want me to continue, Sharon, give your voice?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if you have a look, it says suspension notices, you'll see that in 2020 there was only 31, whereas in 2023 there was 207. The reason for that is not because there's more licences that have been suspended, it's just that during the COVID period, the pandemic, we weren't issuing suspension notices. We were trying to help businesses along as much as possible, so we just didn't do that. So that's the reason why there's a difference there. Moving on to section 4, planned inspections and enforcement. So even though we have had a reduction in staff and other issues, enforcement officers have been continuing to inspect premises at the intervals for risk rated that we previously agreed. So those premises that are subject to complaints, licence breaches or a risk high because officers don't have any faith in their management, they are visited at least once every 9 months. Those that are medium are visited every 18 months. So you'll see on the next page how many inspections were actually carried out. So there's 117 high, 51 medium, and even though we don't have to visit low or very low premises, we still did do those. There's also a section about previously unrated. Now those are premises that may have been granted under licences that might have been granted under delegated authority or have actually come before yourselves at committee. We try to do an initial inspection just to make sure everything's above board. Many things are said at committee, but we do need to make a check to make sure that they are actually doing and complying with the terms and conditions on their licences. So overall, there were 208 inspections carried out last year. We do receive a high volume of complaints, both in the team itself and via the noise and nuisance call-out service. So officers actually investigated 253 complaints last year, and table 7 gives a little bit of a breakdown on what the issues were. If you turn to paragraph 4.8, it says that 27 premises were found to be operated in breach of one or more licence conditions, and that resulted in 17 verbal warnings and 9 written warnings being issued. There should be a little sentence in there about 2 simple cautions that were issued, but I'll come to that a little bit further on in the report. So talking about breaches of conditions, it doesn't matter if it's considered a minor breach or a full breach of condition. Each breach of condition is a criminal offence. If we do go all the way to court with that, there's an unlimited fine, or it could be up to 6 months imprisonment. So if anyone is giving us a little bit too much trouble, we just mention that and they can behave themselves. Just remember. So you can see the level of instances there, but what we do try to do is as much engagement as possible. We only ever go to court and do a simple caution if we think there's no other way around it, and if we think that they're blatantly ignoring the conditions, which some premises do tend to do. So moving on to section 5, that's about tables and chairs licensing. There's nothing really there that we haven't discussed already. But if you do turn to page 34, you can see a list of the types of licences that were granted. And there are either tables and chairs, pavement licences and summertime terraces. So in all for last year there were 684. And just to clarify matters, because it's confusing and I still get confused myself, we have got 3 paragraphs just detailing what is a tables and chairs licence, what is a pavement licence, and what is a summertime licence. Most people do go for the pavement licence rather than the tables and chairs because it's a quicker period, quicker licence process, only 14 days consultation, and it's £100, which the visitors love.
So for Claire, that's one of the bargains we
Yeah,
offer.
it's £100 and they
Such
know
a
it.
deal.
Yeah, let's see. Summertime terraces, that's just started now, so we've already received quite a few expressions of interest for that one. I think last year there was 90, I think, could be 88 to 94 premises that applied for the summertime terraces. So those are the ones that you see out on the road with the lovely covers and sides and so on.
Pavement
It's very,
extension.
pavement extension, very, very popular. The businesses love it, and we had people contacting us in January saying, when can we apply? Moving on to cautions and prosecutions, we didn't have any prosecutions this year or last year, but we did have 2 simple cautions. One was for Casa Cruz, and in that case, one of the owners was actually smoking inside the premises, and he also allowed customers to smoke inside the premises. Committee will know that we're familiar with Casa Cruz. There was the Rita Ora incident in COVID, and after that as well, there was another incident where they weren't able to supply CCTV as they should have done, and that was a breach that was dealt with last year. So they received, or he received, a simple caution for that.
Sounds like another area.
Then there was Mans 136 Brompton Road. That was a premises that, the officers went to visit on the 9th of December, found quite a few issues there, but because they were aware of those issues before and officers had tried to engage with them before, we felt it best to deal with that by a simple caution. And then there's a list of other substantive work undertaken and completed. So Notting Hill Carnival, we still continue to work the 2 days of the Notting Hill Carnival, just making sure that those that have got
I just wondered, when you look at Chelsea football, how is Pubwatch operating and how's it liaising with the licensing?
Okay, I'll come back to that. It's Notting Hill Carnival, we still continue to work this 2 days. Last year there were no seizures by the officers. I usually do alcohol seizures if we find premises selling alcohol without a licence. Most people tend to do that, not realising that for £21 they can get 10 to sell alcohol for both days. But this has been years in the making. We're always out on footprint, and it doesn't surprise me that we didn't see any last year because word is getting around now. One of the things I would like to mention is that Notting Hill Carnival Limited, who are the organisers of the carnival, have introduced a new process for the sound systems that want to appear at Carnival. They would like to streamline the process a little bit more, and those that have sat on tents for Carnival will realise that you could get a very good risk assessment and then another occasion a very bad one. It wasn't streamlined, it was very, a lot of irregularities. So Notting Hill Carnival Limited want to take ownership of that now, so they've told the sound system to come to them first with their event management plans and risk assessments. Once they're happy, then they can come to us. So hopefully we should see an improvement in risk assessments and event management plans that come to committee. Chelsea football home games, that speaks for itself. But to go back to Councillor Wade's question about Pubwatch, there was a Pubwatch in operation for many years, and the reason why that continued because I was the lead organiser of that. Unfortunately, I just haven't got the resources to do that at the moment. It's something that I'd like to do. There was one premises that was willing to take over my lead and organise them, but since then, after COVID, he actually sold up his premises and he's gone. So it is something that we're aware of, that there's no Pubwatch meetings at the moment, and it's something that we're looking to get back, but until we get our staffing back up to normal, unfortunately, I can't.
I think the follow on from that, if you think of Earl's Punt on Chelsea football, depending on the fans that come, you've got a quite good response from the Courtfield letter when you get to Earl's Court Tavern, you know, the further away, but actually now that the allegiances, i.e. some are home fans and some are away fans, and there's been a change. We now don't have the Bolton. So there's that concentration in that area immediately around the station, which means when you look at that, you also have to look at, for example, the co-op, Earls Court Food and Wine, that are actually providing alcohol, which means that you have a congregation to the point that people can't get out of Earls Court Gardens. So it's partly policing, it's partly pub watch, not knowing. It used to be able to give the information to publicans as to which fans were likely to come so that they would be able to respond with their security. So
We still do that. So we have an officer within the team dedicated to Chelsea football home matches. Even last week she was down to Courtfield actually visiting and speaking with them. She works directly with the police,
yes,
so
but
she's
you've got other pubs, haven't you? But
yeah, she does all the pubs. So basically, they meet quite regularly and discuss any premises, any problems following a home game. And then following on from that, either she will visit, or the police will visit, the licensed police will visit and speak to that premises.
Right, because it's not.
Okay, I'll let them know.
Linda, you might want to suggest to the pubs to have a WhatsApp group for games. It really is very similar to how pub watchers work.
There's a company called Locus who are handling the bid process for Earls Court. That was one of my suggestions to them.
Good.
That they are a business.
Yeah.
The fact that Chelsea football, the policing, it's a combination of the lack of policing, so you do get really quite high levels of concentration on people, would be actually dangerous to residents, pedestrians, cyclists. You cannot move. Have you been there? Well, you cannot move and people cannot get out of streets. So I think that I did post kind of made up with the Earls Court Business Forum as to, but they don't have a chair. So it's a bit like, you have a change of ownership. So it's not functioning as it should. So my question is, how can we ensure slightly more proactive advice or security around this, around the area?
I mean, I'll raise it back if the officer's concerned and then I can report back, but I do know they meet with all the pubs and so on regularly. Most of the pubs in Earls Court have actually voluntarily added conditions on home match days that they have extra security. All the pubs are not allowed to actually have people drinking outside after a certain time on home match days.
Yes, but
One of the problems we found.
if you look at that Earls Court Gardens on a match day, you cannot move.
And that's where the police need to get in.
And they're urinating at the back of the Earls Court Health and.
I think, Linda, that's a matter for your local police when you have your next.
No,
I'll report it to the licensed police.
You get Chelsea police
Right,
at match days and they're policing,
right.
all right? They are policing. That means the safer neighbourhood team is not really involved in that. This is a direct response to the fact that there is a match. Therefore, if the police are there, why are they permitting the congregation? Why are they permitting the urination? And one of the things we've suggested is perhaps the Courtfield would like to jet wash both sides of the street.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, take it on board and I'll report back to you. Okay, there is a section about Business and Planning Act, but again, I think we've covered most of that earlier. One thing I will say is that basically, when the Business and Planning Act came out in 2020, it did give those premises that were only allowed to sell and consume alcohol on the premises provisions to actually take the alcohol outside and drink. That has now been extended until September 2024. We don't know whether beyond that it will be extended again. If it's not, then those premises will have to put in a variation to extend their licensable activities for outside. Yeah, it's like March 25, sorry. Extend until March 2025. Animal welfare licensing. The officer has been very, very busy with that. One thing, we did receive a complaint about illegal entry of a monkey. which didn't, didn't transpire to be anything but a, allegation. But what was fascinating is one of our residents has taken it upon herself to rescue cats. And she's been rescuing cats from abroad. So we had a complaint that someone had about 35 cats in their property. We went to visit, and it is a huge dwelling. The cats are really, really well cared for. She said to the officer, if you come across any cats that need help, just let me know.
Do you really have 35?
Yeah.
Wow. And dogs as well?
She had other animals as
Living
well.
trees.
Blimey. 35
Okay.
cats.
Yeah.
How big is the house? It's big.
It's big, yeah.
Really big. Okay.
Very big.
Oh, well, that's good.
Where did you
This is my Tyrone.
Sorry?
Tottenham Borough, is it?
It's I think it's quite close to Ken High Street, if I remember correctly. Yeah, not too far.
So
from
wild
Ken High Street.
animals, lots of cats, all in Ken High Street.
Is she the one with the wild cat?
No.
How about the monkey?
Okay, let's move on.
35 cats.
Yeah, so we've got safety advisory groups, so we tend to have that when there's big events coming to the borough that need a licence and so on. So we've got officers heavily involved in Chelsea Flower Shows, SAGs, Chelsea Football Club SAGs. That's another avenue where any concerns or issues relating to Chelsea Football Club can get reported back. So that's another avenue, Councillor Wade, that we can report back to the SAGs on that. And also Royal Hospital, who we found is doing quite a lot more events now. Pre-application advice service, we've been offering that since, is it about 2012? Yeah, about 2012. And we're finding a lot of solicitors are actually interested, and they're the ones submitting the applications for their clients. We think that could be a bit of a result why you're not getting that many applications coming to the committee as well. We do tell them to liaise with residents. We're aware that residents are very important, and the last thing they should be doing is causing a public nuisance. So once they tell residents of their plans and explain, and the residents seem or feel that they're being listened to, then they don't put in representations.
Very successful policy.
And it has been working. And I believe Roof Gardens, at their most recent application, actually attached their pre-application advice to their application. ISEC Kensington Gardens, I will just mention that because officers spent a lot of time liaising with the organisers for that one. It's just unfortunate that they pulled it and didn't put their I think they put the application in, but withdrew it. But that was quite an interest. It was where they were going to have one of the world's largest high streets, I think, within Kensington Gardens.
Wow.
And a new one, Notting Hill Gate Licensed Premises Forum. I'm not sure which committee members were sitting on the committee in August when two residents asked for a licensed premises forum, so that instead of them going to premises A and premises B and repeating themselves, that there could be one big forum where the residents could go, the licensed premises along Notting Hill Gate could also go, and they could raise any concerns that they have. That meeting has been scheduled for the 21st of March. It does say 2 o'clock there, but I think the time has been changed to 5:30 now. It is open to all.
There's something else.
Is there a conflict?
I've got the conflict, but I can't remember what it is.
It's in the Ruby Zoe Hotel.
Ruby Zoe Hotel, I think, yeah.
Sorry, Archer Street.
Archer Street, yeah, I think it still is at Archer Street. Yeah.
Former the Act.
Yeah,
And what's the date?
it's the 21st of March.
Says here one of the residents, but you mentioned two or whatever. It's interesting. I wonder who it was and which premises.
Well, it was one resident that mentioned it, and then he consulted another resident at the time, and they both said, yeah, that's a good
I
idea.
just wonder what the licensing case was.
It was
What prompted that?
Viahante, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
something
Viahante
was.
on Notting Hill Gate.
87, I think.
Hill Gate, yeah.
It's 87.
Be a new one then.
So, so it's called, yeah, it's an open invite to all. And that summarises the meeting, unless anyone wants to go through the proposed cases, which are listed under Appendix A.
Okay, we agree? Agree?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now we have the appeals update. I got over to Heidi.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm pleased to report that over the last year we had 2 appeals, and they both relate to reviews, where reviews have been called. And the first one was Jayco, which you will remember, which involved a lot of stabbings just off Kensington High Street. And the licence, the premises was reviewed by the police, and there was long hearings, and the committee decided to revoke the licence ultimately. And the premises closed, but they negotiated with the freeholders. And my understanding is that the premises is now changed to a restaurant. So they did appeal, but then they withdrew their appeal. As we didn't really incur a great deal of costs, they paid us £2,000, and we received that money towards the cost that we had incurred. So that's been dealt with. The next appeal is the Pelican, which was also a review which was brought by 9 residents and supported by Environmental Health and Licensing Authority. As this is a public meeting and it's a pending appeal, I won't give any details about the case. Just suffice to say that we did go before the Magistrates Court for directions, and they've listed the case for the 16th, 17th and 18th of July. So I'll be able to update members once that case has been heard. So unless members have got any other questions, that's all the comments I've got on that report.
I'd say well done, having so few
Exactly, it's
cases going to appeal.
Well, it's well done to, I will say that licensing is a team effort. It's a credit to you as well, because that's why we don't get these appeals. So it's, you know, it's governance, licensing, members and legal all involved to make sure that the whole system works well.
I would like to say thank you as well to the committee. It's like some really well thought out meetings, and the proof is in the pudding here, so thank you very much for your time.